The first gunshot rang out just as Beatrice Evans placed flowers on her husband's grave. Startled, she whipped around, scanning the cemetery with fearful eyes. Hillsboro, New Mexico Territory, 1878, was usually peaceful, at least in the daylight hours. "Just hunters," she whispered to herself, but her hands trembled as she arranged the wildflowers. The townspeople watching from afar nodded knowingly to each other. There it was again, more evidence of the Evans widow's curse. Beatrice had heard the whispers for months now. Since Thomas's death in the mine collapse, strange occurrences followed her everywhere. Lightning struck her small cabin twice. The well water turned brackish the day after she drew from it. Animals fled at her approach. And now, gunshots whenever she visited Thomas's grave. "You ought to leave this town, Mrs. Evans," said Mrs. Wilton as Beatrice walked past the general store later that afternoon. "For all our sakes." Beatrice clutched her basket tighter. "This is my home." "Not anymore, it ain't, not since." Mrs. Wilton crossed herself. "Some say your husband disturbed something in that mine, something that's following you now." "That's nonsense," Beatrice replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "3 men dead in that collapse and you the only widow left in town. The others had sense enough to move on. Take it as a sign." Beatrice hurried away, her gray dress swishing against the dusty boardwalk. At 26, she was too young to be branded as she was widow, outsider, cursed. But what choice did she have? The small ranch Thomas had left her was all she had, and she'd be damned if superstition drove her from it. The dusty main street of Hillsboro shimmered in the afternoon heat as she made her way to the mercantile. She needed supplies, flour, coffee, maybe a bit of sugar if she could afford it. The ranch was 3 miles outside of town, and she didn't relish making the trip twice in 1 week. Mrs. Evans. Mr. Phillips, the store owner, nodded curtly as she entered. He didn't meet her eyes. No one did any more. "I need these items, please." She slid a list across the counter. Phillips glanced at it, then at the door, as if wishing someone else would enter and save him from serving her. "You know, Mrs. Evans, I'm running a bit low on flour." Beatrice sighed. "Mr. Phillips, I've been buying flour from you for 5 years. I know very well you keep 50 pounds in storage at all times." A commotion outside drew their attention. The sound of horses and men's voices rose above the usual quiet of the afternoon. Through the dusty window, Beatrice could see a group of riders dismounting in front of the saloon across the street. "Cattle drive," Phillips said, momentarily forgetting his discomfort. "Heading up from the border, looks like." Beatrice nodded disinterestedly. Trail hands meant nothing to her, just more men who would soon hear the rumors about the cursed widow. "My supplies, please," she reminded him. Phillips reluctantly gathered her items, weighing out flour and beans with exaggerated care, as if afraid contamination might spread from her coins to his hands. When finished, he pushed the parcels toward her without wrapping them properly. "That'll be $2.15. Beatrice counted out the money, aware of how few coins remained in her purse. The ranch barely sustained her, and there weren't many who would hire a woman, especially one with her reputation. As she gathered her purchases, the bell above the door jingled. A tall man entered, dust covering his clothes from the trail. His hat shadowed his face, but she could see he wore a revolver low on his hip. "Afternoon," he said, nodding to Phillips. His voice was deep, touched with an accent Beatrice couldn't place, not quite southern, but something similar. "Welcome to Hillsboro," Phillips said, suddenly animated and friendly. "Just in from the trail?" "Yes, sir. Name's Owen Rutherford, looking to resupply before heading north." He stepped aside politely to let Beatrice pass. She kept her eyes down, hoping to escape without incident. But as she moved past him, her package of flour slipped from her grasp, bursting open on the floor in a cloud of white. "Oh," she gasped, mortified. "Let me help you with that, madam," the stranger said, already kneeling to gather what could be salvaged. "No, please don't," Beatrice said hurriedly. She could feel Phillips's horrified stare. "I mean, thank you, but I can manage." Owen Rutherford looked up at her, and for the first time she saw his face clearly. weathered by sun and wind with striking blue eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wasn't young, perhaps in his early 30s, but he had a vitality about him that made her breath catch. "It's no trouble," he insisted, scooping flour into her torn package. "Though I reckon we've lost a good portion to the floorboards." Philip stepped from behind the counter, waving his hands nervously. "Mr. Rutherford, sir, you don't want to be concerning yourself with helping a lady, and why not?" Owen asked, his tone light but with an edge that silenced the shopkeeper. Beatrice felt her cheeks flush. It had been so long since anyone had treated her with simple kindness. "Thank you, Mr. Rutherford, but Mr. Phillips is right. You shouldn't." "Shouldn't what, madam?" Those blue eyes fixed on hers, curious now, she couldn't bring herself to explain. "Nothing, thank you for your help." Owen dusted his hands off and stood. "You've lost at least half your flour, let me replace it for you." "No," Phillips blurted, then moderated his tone. "I mean, I'm sure Mrs. Evans will be fine until her next visit." Owen's eyebrows rose. "Mrs. Evans, is it? Well, Mrs. Evans, I insist. Phillips here can put it on my bill." "I couldn't possibly," Beatrice began. "You could possibly," Owen said with a smile that transformed his face. "Consider it my good deed for the day." Before she could protest further, he turned to Phillips. "2 pounds of flour for the lady, if you please." Phillips hesitated, then moved to comply, muttering under his breath. Beatrice stood awkwardly, aware of the whispers already starting among the other customers who had entered the store. "Thank you," she said quietly to Owen. "But you really shouldn't have." "And why is that?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. She glanced around, seeing the stairs. "You're new in town, you don't understand. Then perhaps you could explain it to me." His manner was easy, as if they were having a normal conversation and not standing in the middle of a scandalized general store. "Here's your flour, Mrs. Evans," Phillips said, thrusting the package at her. "And Mr. Rutherford, I'll help you now." Beatrice nodded her thanks to Owen and hurried out, feeling the weight of stairs on her back. Outside, the afternoon was waning and she needed to start home before dark. She secured her packages in her small wagon and untied her mule from the hitching post. "Mrs. Evans." She turned to see Owen Rutherford striding toward her, his long legs covering the distance quickly. "Mr. Rutherford, really, you've been kind enough. I'm heading out of town myself," he said. "Thought I might ride alongside you a ways if you don't mind the company." Beatrice glanced around nervously. Several townspeople had stopped to watch the exchange. "That's not necessary," she said. "And frankly, it's not wise. Because of whatever it is that makes the good people of Hillsboro treat you like you're carrying cholera," he asked bluntly. She flinched at his directness. "Something like that." "Well, I've never been one for town gossip," he said, "and it's getting dark. A lady shouldn't travel alone." "I do it every day," she replied, but her resolve was weakening. It would be nice to have company, even if just for a short while. "Then one day with an escort won't hurt," he said, smiling again. "I'll get my horse." Before she could argue further, he was gone, striding back to the hitching rail outside the saloon. Beatrice climbed onto her wagon seat, acutely aware of the murmurs around her. Mrs. Wilton stood outside the dressmaker's shop, shaking her head in disapproval. "Your funeral, stranger," someone called out as Owen mounted his chestnut gelding and guided it toward Beatrice's wagon. Owen tipped his hat mockingly to the speaker and fell in beside Beatrice as she flicked the reins to get her mule moving. They traveled in silence until the town was behind them. The desert stretched out on either side of the road, painted gold and pink by the setting sun. In the distance, the Sacramento Mountains rose purple against the sky. "So," Owen said finally, "are you going to tell me what has an entire town trembling at the sight of a slip of a woman?" Beatrice sighed. "They say I'm cursed." "Cursed?" He sounded amused rather than alarmed. "What manner of curse? My husband died in a mine collapse last year. Since then, strange things happen around me. Livestock dies, crops fail, weather turns." She glanced at him. "You think it's ridiculous?" "I think people are superstitious when they can't explain things," he said carefully. "Doesn't make you cursed. 3 families lost men in that collapse," she continued. The other widows left town within months. I stayed. Then, one by one, misfortunes began happening to people who dealt with me. Mr. Carson's prize bull died the day after he sold me feed. The Cooper children came down with fever after playing near my property. Owen frowned. Coincidence? Perhaps, but when lightning struck my cabin twice in 1 month, even I began to wonder. She kept her eyes on the road. You really shouldn't be seen with me. I've weathered worse than a superstitious town, Owen said. I rode with Sibley's brigade in the war. Got caught in a Kansas blizzard 2 years back that killed half our herd. Survived a Comanche raid outside Fort Stockton. He glanced at her. I reckon I can survive riding alongside a pretty widow. Beatrice felt her cheeks grow warm at the compliment. Your choice, but don't say I didn't warn you. As if on cue, the sky darkened suddenly. Clouds rolled in from the west, obscuring the setting sun. The air grew heavy with the promise of rain. See, she said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Clear skies all day and now this. Owen looked up at the gathering clouds. Looks like a summer thunderstorm to me, common enough in these parts, if you say so. The first fat droplets began to fall as they turned onto the narrow track leading to her ranch. By the time the small cabin came into view, rain was pouring down, turning the dirt road to mud that sucked at the wagon wheels. You're welcome to wait out the storm, Beatrice offered, feeling she owed him that much for his kindness. It's not much, but it's dry. Owen nodded, rain streaming from the brim of his hat. Obliged. They made a dash for the cabin after securing the animals in the small barn. Inside, Beatrice quickly lit a lamp and stoked the banked fire in the stone hearth. The cabin was simple, one main room with a small bedroom partitioned off at the back. A rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, and a rocking chair constituted the furniture, along with a small bookshelf filled with well-worn volumes. It's not much, she said apologetically, suddenly seeing her home through a stranger's eyes. It's more than most have, Owen replied, removing his dripping hat. His hair was darker when wet, curling slightly at the nape of his neck. May I? He gestured to the hooks by the door. Of course. She bustled about, putting on water for coffee and trying to ignore the strange intimacy of having a man in her home again. I should thank you properly for your help in town. No thanks needed, he said, hanging up his duster alongside his hat. Though I am curious why you stay, given how they treat you. Beatrice paused in her movements. This land was my husband's dream. We came out from Pennsylvania 7 years ago when the mining started. He worked the mines while I built this place. She gestured around the cabin. Every board, every nail has our sweat in it. I can't just abandon it. Loyalty to the dead is admirable, Owen said, but not at the expense of the living. It's not just loyalty. She set out 2 cups. It's all I have. Where would I go? Back east to family who disowned me for marrying Thomas. I have no skills that would earn me a living in a city. What about the ranch? You could sell it. Beatrice laughed without humor. Who would buy land from a cursed woman? Besides, the drought has made it nearly worthless. I keep a few chickens, a garden when things will grow. It's enough to survive on, barely. The rain hammered on the roof and thunder rumbled in the distance. Owen moved to the window, looking out at the storm. Quite the welcome Hillsboro's giving me, he said, smiling slightly. A spooked town and a deluge. What brings you here anyway? Beatrice asked, pouring the coffee. I'm moving a small herd north to the railhead at Santa Fe, he explained, accepting the cup she offered. Just passing through, really, though I might stay a spell if there's work to be had. Not much call for cowhands in these parts, she said. The mines are the main work, and they're not as prosperous as they once were. Owen sipped his coffee, watching her over the rim of his cup. And what about you, Mrs. Evans? What do you do besides terrify the locals? The unexpected teasing made her smile despite herself. I sell eggs when the hens are laying, take in mending sometimes, though less now that. She trailed off. Now that they think you'll hex their britches, he finished for her. Something like that. A particularly loud crack of thunder made them both jump, and suddenly the lamp flickered and went out, plunging the cabin into semi-darkness. Only the glow from the fire illuminated the room. "Well now," Owen said calmly, "is this part of your curse, Mrs. Evans?" In the firelight, she could see he was smiling, not a trace of fear in his expression. "Beatrice," she said impulsively, "if you're going to brave my curse, you might as well call me Beatrice." "Beatrice," he repeated as if testing the feel of it. "A lovely name. My friends call me Owen." "Are we friends, Mr. Rutherford?" He considered this, setting his cup down on the table. "I think we might be, given time." Another crack of thunder and then a tremendous crash from outside. Beatrice gasped. "Stay here," Owen said, already moving to the door. "No, I'll come with you," she insisted, grabbing a shawl. Together they ventured out onto the covered porch. In the yard, illuminated by a flash of lightning, they could see that a large tree branch had fallen, crushing part of her chicken coop. "Oh no," Beatrice moaned, hurrying down the steps despite the rain. She could hear the panicked clucking of her hens. Owen was right behind her. Together, they managed to lift the branch enough to see that, miraculously, none of the chickens appeared to be injured, though they were thoroughly frightened. "They'll need a dry place for the night," Beatrice said, rain soaking through her shawl. "The barn," Owen suggested. "We can make a temporary pen." By the time they had relocated the chickens and repaired what they could of the coop, both were soaked to the skin. They returned to the cabin where the fire had burned low. "You should change," Owen said, averting his eyes politely. "I'll build up the fire." Beatrice retreated to her small bedroom, grateful for his practicality. She changed quickly into her only other dress, a simple blue cotton, and wrapped a dry shawl around her shoulders. When she returned, Owen had the fire blazing and had removed his wet shirt, which now hung near the hearth to dry. He wore only his undershirt, suspenders hanging at his sides. He looked up when she entered, and something passed between them, a moment of awareness that went beyond their brief acquaintance. "I apologize for the impropriety," he said, gesturing to his state of undress. "But pneumonia didn't seem a better option." "It's your sensible nature that's kept my chickens alive," she replied, attempting lightness. "I can hardly complain about wet clothing." The storm continued to rage outside, and it soon became apparent that Owen would not be able to travel on until morning. Beatrice made a simple supper of beans and cornbread, and they sat at her small table, the strangeness of the situation gradually giving way to comfortable conversation. Owen told her of his life as a cattle driver, of growing up in Louisiana and fighting in the war, of his dreams to one day have a ranch of his own. In turn, Beatrice shared stories of her life with Thomas, of their journey west, and of the hope they'd had for a family that never materialized. "We tried for years," she admitted, surprised at her own candor. "The doctor in Santa Fe finally told me I likely couldn't have children. Thomas was disappointed, but he never blamed me." "He sounds like a good man," Owen said gently. "He was." "Which makes it all the stranger that people think he disturbed something evil in that mine." She shook her head. "Thomas was careful, methodical. Whatever caused that collapse, it wasn't his doing." As the night deepened, Beatrice made up a pallet for Owen near the fire, offering him what blankets she could spare. The storm had lessened to a steady rain, no longer threatening but enough to make travel impossible. "I appreciate your hospitality," Owen said as she prepared to retire to her room. "Especially given the risk to your reputation." Beatrice laughed softly. "My reputation couldn't possibly be worse, Mr. Rutherford." "Owen," he reminded her. "Owen," she echoed, finding she liked the sound of it. "Good night." "Good night, Beatrice." She closed her bedroom door, listening to his movements as he settled on the pallet. It had been so long since she'd had company, longer still since she'd had a conversation that wasn't tinged with fear or pity. Despite the inauspicious circumstances, she found herself grateful for the storm that had brought him to her door. Morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed everything clean. Beatrice rose early, as was her habit, and found Owen already outside, assessing the damage to her property. "The coop needs proper repair," he said when she joined him, "but otherwise you weathered it well." No thanks to my curse, she said wryly. Owen gave her a long look. Do you really believe you're cursed, Beatrice? She hesitated. I don't know what to believe anymore. So many strange things have happened. Coincidences happen to everyone, he said, but people only notice patterns when they're looking for them. His words stayed with her as they worked together to repair the chicken coop. Owen proved handy with tools, and by mid-morning the structure was stronger than it had been before the storm. You didn't have to do all this, Beatrice said as they surveyed their work. I wanted to, he replied simply. Then, more hesitantly, I should be moving on. My men will be wondering where I've got to, Beatrice nodded, ignoring the pang of disappointment. Of course, your herd needs tending. Owen glanced toward the road, then back to her. I'll be in the area for a few days, waiting for the rest of our cattle to arrive from the south. Would it be forward of me to call on you again? The question caught her off guard. You want to return, if I'm welcome, he said, suddenly looking less sure of himself. You are, she said quickly, then added, but the townspeople can mind their own business, he finished for her. I'm not easily frightened, Beatrice. Not by storms, not by superstition, and certainly not by a widow who's shown me nothing but kindness. His words warmed something in her that had been cold for too long. Then yes, you're welcome to call again. Owen did return, 3 days later, bearing gifts of fresh bread and a newspaper from Santa Fe. He helped her mend a broken fence and stayed for supper. When he left, he promised to return the following week. True to his word, he came back, this time with seeds for her garden and news that his cattle drive would be delayed by at least a month due to negotiations with buyers in Santa Fe. A month? Beatrice couldn't hide her surprise or her pleasure. Does that trouble you? He asked, helping her plant the seeds in the freshly turned earth of her garden. Not at all, she admitted. It's nice having a friend. Is that what I am? He asked, his blue eyes searching hers. A friend, Beatrice found herself blushing like a girl. What else would you be? Owen wiped his hands on his trousers and stood. A man who finds himself thinking about a certain widow far more than is proper, perhaps. Her heart skipped. Owen, I know it's too soon, he said quickly. You're still grieving and we barely know each other. But I wanted you to know that my interest in calling on you isn't merely friendship. Beatrice was at a loss for words. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her with anything but fear or suspicion. The idea that this man, this kind, handsome man, could see beyond the rumors to the woman beneath was almost too much to comprehend. I don't know what to say, she admitted finally. You don't have to say anything, Owen assured her. Just don't send me away. I won't, she promised. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that filled Beatrice with a joy she'd thought forever lost to her. Owen would come every few days, sometimes staying for hours, sometimes just long enough to deliver something he thought she might need or enjoy: a book, a jar of honey, a piece of news from town. The townspeople noticed, of course. Whispers followed Owen whenever he ventured into Hillsboro, warnings that he was consorting with a cursed woman, that misfortune would surely befall him. He laughed them off with good humor. Mrs. Wilton cornered me outside the barber shop today, he told Beatrice one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset. Told me I was tempting fate by spending time with you. Beatrice tensed. And what did you say? I told her fate had been mighty kind to me lately. He reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become familiar and cherished. And that if this is what being cursed feels like, I'd happily accept damnation. She laughed, but sobered quickly. Aren't you worried, even a little? Strange things do happen around me. Like what? He challenged. In the month I've known you, what curse has manifested? Beatrice thought about it. Well, there was the storm that first night, a regular summer storm, and the chicken coop collapsed. Because it was poorly built, I fixed it, and has it fallen since? No, she admitted. And have I suffered any misfortune for keeping your company? He pressed. Not that I know of. There you have it. He squeezed her hand. No curse, just a town full of people who need something to fear. As summer waned into fall, Beatrice began to believe him. Her garden flourished under their combined care. Her chickens laid eggs in abundance. Even her appearance changed. The constant worry that had lined her face began to ease, replaced by a glow that came from within. Owen's business in Santa Fe concluded, but still he lingered in Hillsboro, taking odd jobs and spending every spare moment at Beatrice's ranch. The townspeople gradually shifted from overt hostility to grudging acceptance, particularly when no disasters befell Owen or anyone associated with him. One crisp October evening, as they walked along the creek that bordered her property, Owen stopped and turned to face her. "Beatrice," he said, his voice more serious than she'd ever heard it, "I need to ask you something." Her heart quickened. "Yes." "I've bought land, a good parcel about 20 miles north of here. Good grazing land with a strong creek and timber for building." He took both her hands in his. "I aim to build a ranch there, a home." "That's wonderful, Owen," she said, genuinely happy for him but unable to ignore the pang of loss. If he was settling so far away, their visits would become less frequent. "I don't want to build it alone," he continued. "A house needs a heart to make it a home." He drew a deep breath. "I love you, Beatrice Evans. I have almost from the moment I saw you in that store, standing tall despite everyone's fear. You're the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known." Tears filled her eyes. "Owen, you don't have to answer right away," he said quickly. "I know it's sudden and you may need time, but I wanted you to know my intentions are honorable and permanent." Beatrice looked up at him, this man who had walked into her life on a dusty afternoon and changed everything. She had been so consumed with grief and fear for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to hope, to dream, to love, but Owen had reminded her. "I don't need time," she said softly. "I love you too." His face lit up with such joy that it took her breath away. "You do?" "I do," she confirmed, laughing through her tears. "Though heaven knows why you'd want a cursed widow." Owen pulled her close. "Don't you understand yet? You're not cursed, Beatrice. From the moment I met you, you've been my greatest blessing." And there, beside the creek with autumn leaves falling around them like gold coins, Owen Rutherford kissed Beatrice Evans for the first time, a kiss that promised healing, hope, and a future neither had dared imagine. They were married in November, not in Hillsboro's church where whispers might mar the ceremony, but on their new land, under a canopy of pines with a traveling preacher officiating. Owen's cattle drive companions served as witnesses, along with a few brave souls from town who had begun to question the curse narrative. Beatrice wore a new dress of deep blue, with wildflowers in her hair. Owen had never looked more handsome than he did waiting for her, pride and love evident in every line of his body. "Do you, Owen James Rutherford, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the preacher asked. "I do," Owen said firmly, his eyes never leaving Beatrice's face. "And do you, Beatrice Louise Evans, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," she replied, her voice clear and sure. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The preacher smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Owen did, to the cheers of their small gathering. As he drew back, he whispered, "My greatest blessing now and always." By spring, their ranch house was complete, larger and sturdier than Beatrice's cabin, but built with the same love and care. They named it Blessing Ranch, a deliberate choice that made Owen smile every time he said it. The land prospered under their care. The cattle Owen had brought north multiplied. Beatrice's garden expanded into a proper farm plot. They hired hands to help with the increasing workload, men who knew nothing of curses and who came to respect the capable Mrs. Rutherford. Occasionally, they would visit Hillsboro for supplies. The whispers had largely died down, especially after Owen confronted several of the most persistent gossips with evidence of their own misfortunes, unrelated to any contact with Beatrice. "Seems to me," he'd said loudly in the saloon one day, "that Johnson's crop failed because he planted too early, not because my wife rode past his field. And Miller's son broke his arm falling from a horse anyone could see was too wild for a boy his age." Gradually, the superstition faded. New families moved to the area, bringing fresh perspectives. The old story of the cursed widow became just that, a story, told less and less frequently as time passed. 2 years after their wedding, Beatrice felt unwell one morning. The doctor from Santa Fe, summoned by a worried Owen, examined her carefully before breaking into a wide smile. "Mrs. Rutherford," he said, "it appears the diagnosis you received years ago was incorrect. You're going to have a baby." Owen, who had been pacing outside the bedroom, burst in at the news. "A baby, but you said—" "I was told I couldn't," Beatrice whispered, her hands going to her still flat stomach. "The doctor in Santa Fe was mistaken," the current physician confirmed. "It happens. Sometimes the body heals in ways we don't understand." Owen sat on the bed beside her, taking her hands in his. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Our baby. Are you happy?" she asked, searching his face. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," he said, gathering her into his arms. "This is—" He paused, overcome with emotion. "This is yet another blessing." Their son was born the following winter, a healthy, robust boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. They named him Thomas Owen Rutherford, honoring the past while embracing their future. As Beatrice watched Owen rock their son before the fire, singing softly to him, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed. From widowhood to new love, from fear to joy, from curse to blessing, the journey had been unexpected but perfect in its way. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About curses and blessings," she replied honestly. "About how sometimes they're just different ways of looking at the same life." Owen nodded, understanding her perfectly as he always did. "And which way do you see things now?" Beatrice crossed the room to join her family, placing a gentle kiss on her son's head and then on her husband's lips. "As the most blessed woman in the New Mexico territory," she said, "and beyond."